So I'm back to do episode 3, and I just so happened my good friend came into town. So I said, dude, we're recording. So I put him fully in the hot seat. We haven't seen each other face to face. I don't know. How long?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
And I get to see him right here and we're recording. So forgive us for any catch up or fall back on old times, but I think it'll all be good. And I know I can trust Darren, first of all, is my friend's name here. And I don't know, how do you introduce yourself?
Oh, I have a lot more titles that are annoying than I used to. But, so currently I'm still a LMFT clinician. And then I also do work with Southwestern Regional Medical Educational, which is a residency program for physicians in Southern California. So I'm the wellness director for the entire program. And then I'm also behavioral health faculty for family medicine residency program. So I do education and supervision of them as well. So those are the titles, but Darren Smith's the name.
Yeah. Well, and I was talking to actually one of our staff members who knows you. And we were talking about the good fruit of all that you've done in our lives. And for me, I say you're my mentor because you've led us in such good ways to where now, even at the bedrock of what Country Strong is teachings you've given us, permission to be wild or be firm in your position, or here's this book you need to read. That's why you're struggling and spinning circles, all those stories we have. And then getting me through my own personal, really hard time, career shift and everything else. So what I wanted to do, though, is give some of the good nuggets I can go back to as far as parenting and family dynamics, right? And what we see at Country Strong and what we're trying to produce of not the low functioning human as a kid or as an adult. So we can get into some of that explanation. But I remember an aha moment for Karina and I when we first came to see you, and we were talking about our daughter and the struggles of like dealing with the 3-4-year-old, and you're trying to not be the heavy hand, you're trying to be the loving parent and all this stuff. And you looked at us and you said, so wait a second, the 3-year-old is running the show and you're 2 functioning adults? We took a moment. We looked at each other like, oh no, we're getting worked by a 3-year-old. And from there,
sounds like something mean I would say to parents.
Well, it was obvious once you said it. You're like, yeah, how are we not getting ahead of a 3-year-old? And that was just in basic parenting, right? If you're not getting ahead of the child and looking for where they're going or what you can do, or okay, we're going to go to the store. Let's make an agreement before we go in the store about a fit, about are we getting a candy bar or not, or any just basic tools like that, which parents don't get by and large.
No, yeah. We typically kind of look in the rearview mirror a lot about we just don't want to be our parents, but that still becomes the paradigm of not that, not that, not that. But you really don't move into a picture of a child or a picture of a parent that you want. And I think it's hard to kind of realize, that reality of kids will map out and figure out your weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And the easiest way to understand that is there's kids that get away with stuff with you that they don't with mom.
Right.
Well, how did the kid figure out, which parent to go to? Triangulation is what we're talking about a little bit, Murray Bowen stuff, family system stuff. But yeah, kids figure out relatively quickly how to make moves to get what they need, and good and unhealthy ways. But it's that part of that process of, the reality is long-term kids will find out your blind spots and hang out there, and, you're kind of struggling.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not, I think what also is relieving is it's not uncommon. I mean, that's just, that's what parents are going through. And that's, the kids have one job, and it's, you've got probably 10 things on your brain. They've got one. I want to get over to my friend's house. I want to eat that snack over there. I want them to give me their attention. Whatever it is, they're singularly focused for the most part. And you're already behind because you're thinking about 15 other things.
Yeah, I think by creation or by design, you have an incredible ability to connect with another human being, a desire to have value and meaning in the relationship with others. But you also have a phenomenal need and desire for autonomy and independence to choose who you're going to be and have that be validated, have that be honored, have that be respected, to have value in who you are, but also to have value that others recognize. And there's a balance between the two. And it gets generationally skewed, depending on the family you come from. But
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go, before we get into kind of what I wanted to get into, do a quick unpack when we start talking low function to high function and those dynamics in a room, a group of kids, or some kind of scenario, so that when we reference that, people aren't going, what do they mean? Because low function, does that mean they're like an alcoholic function, or does that mean, what does that mean? A lot of people will probably.
So
and Karina, I'm honoring you right now because you said don't get too technical with Darren. So I'm starting base because that's an important, I think, term if we go into the meat of what I want.
I don't make a promise to Karina to not geek out, but I'm sure I'll contain myself. So, so high functioning, low functioning in family systems, relationship dynamics. And this is not just based on a theory. This is really based on brain function. This is the way your mind works. This is the way your brain is neurologically wired to work. There's huge components of how we operate in developing our sense of who we are that are directly correlated to the other brain in the room. So it's a brain-to-brain contact. The neurons that are there are the strongest, most powerful ones we have. They're the fastest ones that we have. Mammals have them too, dolphins, primates, elephants have them. When you look at those social structures, and we have this tendency to, they're loving. Yeah, they seemingly have this ability to know what's wrong and to gather around and protect. And there's structures in the brain that are wired for that and for that alone. So, we were created for relationship. If you're not a creationist and you're more a design guy, you're designed for relationship, whether you want it to, you just got to deal with that fact.
Right.
So,
right.
But what's fascinating to me is those neurological structures are directly connected to my ability to identify me, which is me, not me. And it's not a logical construct. It's actually a neurological construct, which means it's physiological or it's kinesthetic. So me, not me is a kinesthetic overlay. So it's this idea of I know that this is me and I know that you are not me. And you have that ability. You're born with it. It's fully functional by age 4. So you have this construct of I know. Oh, the other part, so the part of my brain that identifies me, not me, you, me, separateness, but there's a connection here. The other part is directly tied to disgusting behavior. And the easiest way to explain that is physical disgust. So when you have a visceral response of turning away if I shoved some rotten meat or there's a skunk and you're like, ugh. You have that visceral disgust response. That's a natural survival mechanism.
Right.
Here's the fun part. That part of your brain doesn't distinguish, bless you,
Excuse me,
between moral or physical disgust.
So, yeah, that is very interesting. That part of the brain doesn't have the cognitive component to that, right? Is that fair to say?
You develop that cognitive component as you grow. But this is based on a kinesthetic overlay, so it's a felt experience, but it's based on behavior. That behavior that the other person is doing
is disgusting.
Is not good for this other.
Gotcha.
So think in small language, think in child language.
Okay.
Fully functional by age 4. So you have a 4-year-old who knows you are not good for this organism, me. That, not good for this.
Okay.
You, not good for me. So low functioning is behaviors, things being done that aren't good for me. Physical touching, verbal and emotional abuse, physical abuse, those are the easy ones to see. But just forced behaviors, I think the best example I had is when my daughter was little. Pretty hypersensitive, kinesthetic kid, pretty aware of the world around her. So really sensitive. And there was a moment when I was just learning this stuff. My daughter was probably 5-ish. And there was something going on. I don't exactly remember the setting, but I remember that I was there and she was really attached to my leg. And I had been around her long enough to kind of realize this is not a kid you push. She pushes back and hard. So I just kind of let her be. And a family member came to kind of take her to introduce her to someone. It's like, oh, come on, this is so-and-so. They're, a friend, and, we just want you. And my daughter switched to, there's a death grip on my leg. Like, she was not having it. She was very uncomfortable. And my family member insisted, like, you are going to go say hi and go say hello.
Right.
And I kind of stepped in a little bit. I'm like, I'll go over there.
Right.
So I kind of walked over there and this is so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. And that person reached out to hug. And my daughter just viscerally, like, turned away. Like, this is not okay for me.
Right.
And I remember saying, oh, this is okay. We're good. And I go, pleasure to meet you. And I started to turn away. I'm like, we're good.
Yeah.
And my family member
that was doing the intro.
Was like, oh, no, you're going to let her hug you. And I'm like, there's disgusting behavior to my child.
Forcing it.
Forced behavior.
Gotcha.
And I was like, and I remember this moment of like, yeah, that's what they did to me all the time. And I remember that moment of like, oh, this is what it's like. Because I was really attuned to, because the moment my daughter turned away, I was like, I recognize that that physical sense of pulling in and wanting to protect. And so now, the lowest functioning person controls the relationship, and you have one of my family members who's trying to control what's happening. And I'll never forget, there was this moment, and I go, no, we're okay. I go, pleasure to meet you. We're going to go here and take a minute.
Yeah.
And I remember that family member looking at me in the eye with just this vitriol, like, you're embarrassing me.
It was about them.
And I was like, oh. And on the one hand, it's like, I'd done enough work with this family member to be like, oh, yeah, I see you. I got you. But on the minute, I'm like, I had already told this family member, you are not going to do to my kids what you did to me. Like, you're not. And that was really the beginning of the end of that functional relationship, because what happened after that was my daughter started to be really clear about not wanting to be around that family member because they weren't good for her.
Interesting. So the child's intuition, where some people are wise enough to go, well, there's something there. If it's out of ordinary and they're doing that, you're not good for me, if that's a good way to.
It is, but I think this is the piece about a parent that it was really good for me to see, because what I started to identify and confront and kind of deal with this family member from that perspective about their behaviors and the way their definition of family was not probably, if it wasn't good for me, why would it be good for my child? Like, that's just not the way this is going to go. So I'd already begun to confront the behavior, but the behavior in the moment of wanting me and my daughter to do something that made them feel better or made them look good. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much most typical parents. We kind of raise our kids to be the son and the daughter that we think or we would like them to be. But along the way, what we really forget or ignore is that there are very real world moments where I'm the lowest functioning person in the room when it comes to my kids. Because there's two things I haven't done before. I haven't raised a son and a daughter before, ever. And if all I'm going off of is my past experiences or what I know about that doesn't mean I know exactly what to do every moment of every day. But if you develop a relationship with the kid, and I'm not stipulating or agreeing that the kid should be in charge.
Well, that's the fine line. That's where this will go. But finish. Yeah.
But really pay attention, because I've got another kid who's a son who his comfort zone and his ability, he's a different dude. Mm-hmm. He's a different kid. So I had to raise him differently.
Right.
And to this day, they're in their 20s. One of them's in my blind spot, and the other one just comes at me head on.
Yeah.
And okay, but I think from my perspective of, if I make a decision that I'm not going to be the lowest functioning person in the room, by default, my paradigm has to be, it's my responsibility as a parent to create a world where my child's functional realities of the world, who they are, their personality, their characteristics, their weaknesses, their strengths, their vulnerabilities, their abilities, are fostered and grown. And I know one thing about parenting that I know more than anything else. You better strap down, because you're going to have to grow big. Because the majority of the time, and this is from clinical and research perspective as too, we're either standing in their way or holding them back.
Yeah.
And I had a mentor with me a long time ago. He said to me, your job and your responsibility as a human being, and as a parent in particular, is to raise your children in a way where they stop needing you long before they leave you.
That is so good. That is exactly the conversation I've been having with staff, Karina, friends. It's not actually a bad thing if at 13 and 14 they're wanting more, hungry for autonomy.
So I think an example of, for me, learning was that balance between underparenting or overparenting. There's a lot of other language for it. My little girl was pretty independent, really active, wanted to do things her way. And I remember there was one time I was trying to help her do something, and I was kind of like, hey, let me help you do it. Mm-hmm. And we actually still use this phrase at times as a joke, and she's really good about it. But she would, you kind of do, as a parent, you kind of put your hand in there like, oh, here, let me help you. And she would take your hand and kind of move it away, or she would grab it, and you know her, so you can probably see her doing this. And then she'd look you in the eye, and she'd be like, I do it, Daddy. I do it. No, Daddy, I do it. Mm-hmm. She'd get frustrated.
Yeah.
Like, oh. And so whether it was teaching her to make pancakes or tying her shoes or doing whatever, mm-hmm. there was this, she wanted to be herself. She wanted to be successful. She wanted to learn. She wanted to try things. She wanted to do things. And it was, more about either I was impatient and wanting to get it done because, time.
A lot of that happens. Yep.
Or it was more like, well, she wasn't doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. But throughout this learning process so now there's these moments where, we'll be in the kitchen and I'm the cook chef in the house. And so I'm always in there, and someone else will be like, no, my daughter will be, she's like, hey, Dad, can you come and help me? So I'll get in there and I'll start helping, and that actually just happened not too long ago. She had a utensil, mm-hmm. and she looked at me and she said, I do it. And I was stopping and going, but the look in her eye wasn't this cute little kid. It was kind of like, back off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She's like, I'm asking you to answer questions. I'm not asking you to step in and do it. I want to learn how to do this. I want to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing process and learning, but, compulsively, I just still can't help myself. But there's an element of being really clear. I want to raise my kids to stop needing me long before they leave me. But think about that for a minute. That started with my daughter when she was 3, 4.
Yeah.
I do it.
Yeah.
I want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But automatically in that moment, as parents, we're not trying to create a world big enough for them to learn in and simply put decent guardrails on, and then whatever else happens in the middle. And I think one of the things I've always worked with parenting was, what are the hard and set fast rules about, and Robert Fulghum wrote this book called Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, which is raise your hand, take your turn, say please and thank you, be nice to others, share your food, that kind of stuff. So
don't whack people over the head with toys.
Correct. Hands off.
Hands off, right.
Body respect, self-respect.
Yep.
Pick up your toys, clean up after yourself. So I've always traced those are the hard and fast rules. Those are just things that make family work well. Who does what, how, the follow through. I've always been, I don't care. I don't care. You develop your own way of contributing to the family. But I'm not going to do it in a way where you become the son and the daughter that I think you should be, as opposed to you teach me how to be the father to the son you already believe you want to be. Because that demands that I'm the one that makes the first move. I'm the one that grows first. I'm the one that figures out, if I make the mistake, I demonstrate repair and reconciliation and forgiveness and accountability and responsibility. Because if I've got a child who's telling me, you're in my way, or get out of my way, those behaviors look really easy at 4 and 5. They're resisting you. They're screaming, no, they're biting you. They're doing whatever. You're in their way.
Yeah.
Get out.
Right.
See what happens. And then the kid who's, doesn't need a leash, but definitely needs a little bit more. I got one kid who's never needed bumpers. I got another kid who's always needed extra padded bumpers. Okay, so I don't want to be between the kid and the bumper, though.
No.
But there's been times with the other kid I've nudged him towards the rail.
Yeah.
For one reason only. Get out of your comfort zone. Realize the world is way bigger than you're playing it. Right. And so there's those elements of how do we do that, but the piece it is you have to, I think we mentioned the word pace. You have to outpace your kids by far, which means you're walking into all your old stuff. You're dealing with all of your fears and worries and insecurities. I cannot afford to turn my kids loose into the world I know that I live in, and I've hamstrung them, or I've ill-equipped them, or I've wounded them so deeply they can't even see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
That's on me.
Right.
And this is that generational stuff that you start to see. I shared the phrase with you, a child will lie in the gutter if that's what it means to look up to the parent. Think about the image there.
I'm getting the visceral disgust response.
Yeah.
Because they will.
Well, and you and I mentioned this. On the one hand, there's kids that are not kids. These are adults. These are the people I see in my office.
Okay.
Who generationally have raised kids not much better than they were raised. And, their marriages are falling apart. They don't have good relationships. They're not self-care much. And these are high-functioning people. These are lawyers and doctors and therapists and business owners and firefighters and first responders. And, these are not This is not, these are higher functioning, normal, everyday people, middle class, and even higher than that. So the people you think who've got it all together because you've narrowly constructed them as their successes financially based or economically based or whatever, and that's not accurate.
Right.
Sometimes those families are more train wrecks than you would actually believe. But you want to really look at it from a standpoint of, on the one hand, you can have a tremendous amount of successes everywhere else in your life, but if your relationship, your marriage, and your family is really not much better than what you did, and Murray Bowen and Family Systems and the research now talks about that.
Yeah.
You're no better than when you left. I asked this question to the residents that I work with.
Okay.
Because they're starting. Some of them are starting families of their own in the residency program, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And so there's this moment of, I was asked this question by a room full of emergency medicine doctors. Like, is family system stuff really, is therapy really meaningful? And I'm a little bent and twisted. And I said, most of these people are late 20s, early 30s. And I said, let me ask you a simple question. How many of you see your families? And they all raise their hand. I'm like, you all are doctors, MDs. Like, you are, excuse my language, the shit. Like, you're the bomb. You're the creme de, like, you, science, you're emergency room doctors.
Right. Supposed to be the big brains.
Yeah, never mind that they're the highest rate, second, third highest rates of suicide and substance use in the country, which is terrifying, but we don't take care of them, but we're working on it. But I go, when you go home and you walk into dear old mom and dad's house, how old do you feel? And they all started laughing and chuckling. I'm like, give me some numbers.
Yeah.
So these are the people that are going to stitch you up when you're bleeding. But when mom and dad walks in the room, I heard everything from 6 to 13.
Not where they're at, not their current age.
So
what is that? So to me, then
in that scenario, who's the lower functioning? Go back to the image of a child on the floor.
Right.
So I'm 30. I'm an MD. Mom walks in and I'm 12.
Right.
I got to assume a position based on who's in the room. It's always the lowest functioning person. In that scenario.
Yeah.
As opposed to having a 4-year-old look you in the eyeball and go, I do it, Daddy.
Right.
And her frustration when I didn't make room for her. But if I've promised and I've decided that I'm going to be really clear, because this child on the floor thing is disconcerting, because the majority of a lot of adults that I've seen are still on the floor emotionally and in their relationships. They can't, and they function poorly.
I want to go back to that, but we'll finish.
Can't. One of my mentors said it's this milk toast thing of I got to check in with mommy and daddy and make sure that I'm okay. It's other validation. It's this validation of, am I okay? Am I safe? Am I okay? Am I safe? So you have this.
Which parents want that for their own worth and wire that weird stuff. And it gets weird. But there's a lot of that.
I know. I get that.
Yeah.
Welcome to the real world.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's not your kids. But you do. You have this idea of fears of validation, imposter syndrome in my world with physicians or executives or people high functioning. I'm doing the work, but I don't feel like I should be here. I'm afraid of being found out. There's this insecurity and self-doubt and self-criticism that's really reeking in the back of your mind, the voice in your head stuff. But you have a child who's on the floor or on your back foot and has difficulty getting off the floor or asserting themselves or kind of being present in the world in a healthy and a strong and a confident way. And it's really directly tied to the way that they were raised. But this is where that disgust response sense of self things is. You actually feel your felt sense of the world is you need permission.
You see
not allowed.
so much of that. Yeah.
And I'm not really sure. Let me check in, or is it okay?
Right.
That's a child on the floor. And that's just emotional, weird, sometimes some strict conservative religious pieces that can fall into place there, and you have to be careful. But there's this other piece of just this person who doesn't have a stronger kinesthetic sense of who they are. The flip side of that is parents who put the kid on the floor. And anytime that kid tries to get up, it's put in their place and hit back down, whether physically or emotionally or otherwise, it's get on the floor. So you have adults, so you have young kids who get into the teenage years and they can barely get out of the house, they can barely function. They're really, and the research on this is fascinating. This is where academics come into play. This is where physical health comes into play. This is the ACEs studies. So this is the chronic long-term diseases, self-destructive behaviors, drug abuse, teen pregnancies, blah, blah, blah. The list is huge. And the data's out there. It's just phenomenal.
Right.
Coming from these enmeshed low-function families, that's just what they produce. The flip side of that is I've never met a kid in their teenage years who finally makes the move to come off the floor and comes off the floor with grace and dignity and understanding.
They haven't developed that yet. No way.
Come out hot and angry. And then that person leaves the home, gets away from the home, but that underlying I'm gonna be and I have to and screw you and no, I get that too. There's this chip on the shoulder of nobody puts baby in the corner and I'm not going to be put on the floor ever again.
Right.
And, you know, imagine that parent raising a kid to be violent, to be aggressive, to be, you know, don't ever take it from anybody and, you know, don't, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But then having a kid who's not like that and calling them a pussy and a weakling and a wimp and a, so you end up with, you're raising kids who are still on the floor, they're just under your thumb, or you're working out your own issues about being afraid and being bullied by making your kid into someone who never takes it. And you're still just generationally creating the same dynamics.
Yeah.
As opposed to something that's more in the middle of, you know, making the transition to teenage years and tremendous amounts of accountability with the ability to make up your own mind. But I was really clear. I've spent a lifetime with the voices in my head that really aren't mine. But neuroscience is really fascinating. Neuropsychology there's some of these authors, they write about psychotic voices and non-psychotic people. That little you piece of, or why would you think that way? This critical judgment, self-critique that you have of yourself that is not your friend and not healthy. That gets wired into that sense of self by someone. It's not you.
Somewhere along the line.
It's the version of you
right,
that you had to become because of what was the other brain in the room? Who were the other brains in the room? What were they telling you? I remember, how dare you embarrass me?
Right.
I'm almost positive that a little 5-year-old kid and a 30-something-year-old dad are not responsible for somebody else's feelings, somebody else's emotions, somebody else's sense of embarrassment, somebody else's sense of self. I didn't make you, and I'm not responsible for you. And I know that's how I was raised, to be responsible for my parents, to be responsible for how other people viewed them instead of how they viewed me. And I was not going to do that to my kids.
Yeah.
That's so wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have now, being, year 4 running the learning center, right? We have story after story of seeing this play out in like the behavior that's before me and the child. And then your voice and many other studies and voices, authors ringing in my head of like, there's so much more than just work that behavior out in the moment, right? Because then you're not really, if I'm being honest, right, I'm just making my day or the task that we are trying to accomplish at the learning center, the workout, the whatever, easier in that moment. But I'm not actually addressing the human that's right there, unless I go a couple layers, right, at least. Yeah. And then there's a certain part where I just can't reach that far. It's up to the family, and that And if they're not in line and what that kid's going through on the rest of their time, I can only go so far. So then I have to realize that, right, too. So
here's my challenge to you. I disagree.
Do tell.
Remember I told you the brain in the room is the only brain that matters.
Yeah.
So if you're the brain in the room and you're developing a relationship with a kid, a child, a young boy, a young girl, and their kinesthetic felt sense of experience that they're getting from you and the other staff members there at the gym is one of, I have value, which is not a concept.
Right.
The simple question of, what do you want the class to cook today? What workout do you want to lead today? The behavior is, I'm making room for you to put your opinion, to put your sense of who you are, to choose. Who do you want to be today? I'm giving you an opportunity to lead. I'm giving you an opportunity to be what you want.
Right.
You definitely have to take, I don't know, off the table. Well, then I don't know what we're going to do today. But you have to be really clear. The brain in the room, please don't undersell your brain's ability to keep track of this stuff.
Right.
I remember to this day, and I can even feel it right now, men and women in my life, my grandparents being some of them, who looked me in the eye, and I know they meant it when they said, what do you want? What do you want to do? What do you want to eat? Where do you want to go? How do you want to do this? Hey, come over here and learn how to do this. Hey, stick your head under your, one of my grandfathers was a mechanic. He's like, hand me that. And then, no, don't. See that? Yeah. Put your hand in there. Hold on to it.
Right. Yeah.
The behavior is a kinesthetic overlay of, I'm thinking, you're competent. Your opinion matters. Your thoughts, your wants, your wishes, your desires, your contribution is in the doing. Behavior speaks to intention. So there's an element where I want people to be strong enough and healthy enough to realize that there's some research that was done about brain function, but it came out of burnout research about, what's wrong with people, why do they struggle with burnout, and the end upshot of it is burnout's actually not a problem with the person, it's a problem with the environment that they're in. You know this, you're a firefighter. Just saying. So, but this idea came as this recognition of what we weren't doing was we weren't actually dealing with the spiritual nature of self.
Wow.
So they started doing research and come to find out 1/3 of your identity is spiritual in nature. And I'm going to geek out, Karina. Here we go. You're born with it.
That's awesome.
So biblical narrative, because we love that. David said, before I was in the womb, you knew me. That word know, it's the same thing that means to be seen. Think about it. There are biological structures. When I look at you, I am either seen or not seen. And I'm born with that capability, and it's spiritual in nature, which means I am, and I know what's good for me and what's not good for me. And I'm going to kinesthetically remember what that feels like.
Oh, millions of reps of that.
You at the gym have that power. You are touching, this is soul. This is core essence of who we are as human beings. You have the ability to impact people for the better.
Right.
And it's a kinesthetic remembering. Trauma does the opposite. It just takes acid through that kinesthetic remembering and focuses on a singular point in time.
Yeah.
But we know that people who have these kinesthetic moments of I matter, my choices, my decisions, who I am, are the ones who have the ability to take traumatic moments and decide who they're going to be in and because of the trauma, which means they don't get stuck in it. They work through it because it doesn't alter who they really ultimately are at their core. It's something that happened to me. It's something that doesn't dictate who I'm going to be.
Right.
Because
that's huge differentiation for the trauma.
So there's an element of the mind mapping understanding and the ability to really see this brain to brain. You have an impact.
Yeah.
And these kids are going to remember. Here's where I have fun. If you're working with kids and you are creating for them an entire world and a culture and a phenomenon of development of self, capabilities, functions, because what you're building into these kids, I'm going to geek out, Karina, and it's going to be a good thing because this is about your school. You are creating a kinesthetic world where they have the confidence in themselves because they have the behavior to back it up. These are kids who are never going to be told again that they can't do something.
Amen to that.
These are kids who are never going to be told that they're dumb or they're stupid or they don't know. For two reasons. They've got a ton of adults in the room who are defining a sense of self for them that is of their own creation and of their own design. So I don't know what more you could ask for. And here's where I love it. You're creating a hell of a world for those parents at home because now you've got a 9, 10, 12-year-old kid who's going to create hell for that parent.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and I used to do a lot of adoption, foster care, transition of life stuff, a lot of really difficult kids. And part of the assessment was really trying to find out, do I have some collaboration with the parents? And sometimes you could get the parents to the table and get a little leverage and get a little hook and kind of create some room for the kid to kind of behave well and kind of do better and kind of take some ownership and responsibility and kind of get the parents out of the way or at least to back off a little bit. And then there was other times where it was just really spending a 2 or 3 year process of just kind of, let's get this kid till they're 18 and then get out of the home, which is the lowest functioning person in the home is the parent. Most of these kids knew that. But it was an element of, I'm not going to tell you that your parent's right. I'm not going to tell you that your parents are good for you. You already know I'm lying to you if you do.
Right. You can't pull that. Yep.
So then, all right. So do you want to go over, around, or through, or away from your parent? Either one's fine for me. Any of them are fine for me. But stop acting like if the lowest functioning person in the room is the parent, and you're telling this kid to love your mom and love your dad, my hackles get up.
Yeah.
Because that kid knows. By the way, second part of that, I know whether you're good for me at 4. 5-year-old knows when you're lying to him.
100%.
By 9, they can lie to you and hide it. Because they've figured out what you want to hear, what you're willing to believe, and what tickles your fancy and makes you less anxious and makes you happy. So you got a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid who's already playing you. That's low function.
If you're the one getting played.
No, that's low function for the kid.
For the kid to be playing. Yeah.
Why the heck would you saddle a kid with trying to figure out how to get around you to live their own life?
Right.
As opposed to collaborating with your child in a way where they're their best self and your fingerprints aren't on it. If my kid's 18, 19, 20 years old and they're not doing something or they're doing something because it's my voice in their head.
Yeah, that disgusts me.
Well, you know what the other side of that is? They're doing whatever they want to do and I'm the phone call they make because I'm going to come bail them out.
Bail them out.
As opposed to you make up your mind. You're accountable. You're responsible.
Natural consequences. Well, I tell that. So there's a couple things that I say, and I'm going to check my verbiage with you. That's dangerous for those of you who don't know. You could really get, not from me. I'm used to it. I like to check myself. And that's one thing too. If you can create a passion and a love and some type of motivator that it's okay, we're all going through this, sometimes that permission or whatever to dive in. It's a fascinating world when you start unpacking this stuff.
Yeah.
As long as you're not so fragile that your ego can't take it, right? That's where I see a lot of people get hung up. But back to what some of the things I say to the kids. And this started with the group of young men that I coach for one of the local schools that it's their football program. And I said to him, I can't remember if it was what I was reading at the time, but I said to him, I'm not going to rescue you from the pain of this workout. Anyone that wants to rescue you at your age, because half of them are driving to the practice, and deliver you from the pain you're about to experience, about some intentional pain that has good fruit on the back end, watch out for that person. I am telling you, you're 100% capable. Go do that. Experience the pain. It's worth it. You want to go run across the football field at full speed and crash into another human. You should be able to take the pain of a minute plank. Take the pain of running out your 200, so I'm checking my verbiage. Would that not be an accurate statement?
It is, but I think you need to create the bumpers on either side. If you're trying to protect yourself, you're going to get injured because there's ways to build your body mass and ways to protect yourself,
right?
Ways to hit, ways to be strong enough to do those kinds of things and minimize the risk and minimize the injury. So you have to be strong enough to do that. The flip side of that is when you get taught by someone who says pain is weakness leaving the body, those people end up injured too.
Yeah, right. So an intentional use of that.
But I think this is where you really have to educate the kids and let them know what we're doing. It's my responsibility to keep you safe. So on the one hand, I'm not sending you headlong into adversity without the training and the skills, the ability to handle the hit that you're going to take.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have to learn how to take the hits. So there's this concept. So we're talking about a little about resiliency and tolerance.
Right.
And I've hammered this home with you guys at the gym constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, the way we learn, the way in the gym, the idea, because there's two problems. I'm going to protect you from the pain. Well, then you're lifting 150 pounds for the rest of your life, and that's really all there's ever going to be. Mm-hmm. You're not going to improve. You're not going to be any stronger. You're not going to be any more tolerant. Overlift,
yeah,
you're injured, and then you're set back, and progress is maintained, and maybe you have an injury that interferes with your ability to be whole and healthy in the long run anyway. Those concept works, and from my world, works with therapeutic treatment. Mm-hmm. I've been taught and trained. The zeitgeist of the majority of the world is a little frightening and scary because it's like, don't re-traumatize the patient. Believe it or not, your brain learns the same way. Who knew? I was taught and trained that the best therapy is done at the point of regression. Think about that. I want to know what your cognitive ability is. I want to know what your underlying paradigm belief system is. I want to know what your emotional, self-soothing, self-regulatory skills are. Mm-hmm. Then if we do therapy where you're comfortable, we're never going to know what your limitations are.
Right.
The problem is then your low functioning is guiding therapy.
The therapy. Because you're trying to, not your job is to just keep me comfortable, not actually produce results. So that's similar to the physical, right? If I tell the kids, no, I'm going to keep you safe and painless, well, then they wouldn't get results.
No.
So I see that and I go, that you're going to make it through it. I just look at them wholeheartedly and I look at them and you're going to make it through it. And it's amazing. Kids now, I'll be teaching them, just walking them through the confidence I can see to do one squat. Can I stand back up?
Yeah.
So those kids are probably the ones laying down in the gutter, I would imagine. I don't know. There's probably a lot to unpack there. But it's phenomenal to me that no one's looked at you and spoke to you and then nudged you hard enough to have you just bend your hips and knees and ankles enough to do a squat. And they literally will go through that physical motion and things are falling apart. Knee structure, everything's falling apart. You watch the brain go sideways, like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? And in those moments as a coach, you're just walking over, you're all right.
Yeah.
You're okay. You're good. You're good.
So
Like,
the successive approximations to the goal in those pieces. But, you have a kid who says, I can't. And then they do their first squat. And the kid they were when they started and the kid they were when they're done is different.
yeah.
That's change. That's what you're looking for. But the parenting paradigm here still fits because you have therapists who are doing therapy with clients and they're afraid of hurting them. They're afraid of upsetting the patient. They're afraid of, or they're anxious, or they're afraid, or they feel incompetent. And here's how I was taught. In that moment in time, who's the lowest functioning person in the room? It's not the client.
Right.
It's the therapist.
Which is shockingly common as well.
That's terrifying to me.
It's terrifying.
How can I ask my clients to do work I'm afraid to do?
Well, there it is. That's what we're asking sometimes as parents, if we're not careful. That's what we're asking our kids to do. As bosses, as a leader, I adopt that all the time. I tell my staff, I look at them, I will never ask you to do something I won't do.
I want you to be more aware of anxiety in the room for all of us. It's not sometimes. It's most of the time. It's how we live. It's how we were trained to live. The anxiousness of upset of mom and dad, the trepidation of being seen and having that being judged and critiqued. The moment that I poke my head up, it gets lopped off. The moment I say, I do it, the answer is no. The moment I say, I do it, and that was the wrong way, that kid at some point is going to stop asking to do it.
So I have a couple examples I want to kind of work through, right? And I have like 20 rolling through my mind as you're talking because I experience this so often now. But we'll go with some of the more basic, or not necessarily basic, but easier to, pretty very illustrative, okay? The parents that will bring their kids to us, and we always do extensive front loading if they're going to fit for our program. And one of the things, the first tests that Karina does, a lot of times I can just see them walk in and I'm like, maybe I'm judgy. I can tell. But anyway, she'll just look at the kid, no matter their age, because this is a basic function as you're illustrating, and it's there, no matter their age, because we're first grade up for them to participate. Can you ask my staff for help?
Yeah.
And the parent will go, oh, yeah, they can ask. No. I'm asking the kid.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so from ranges of ages 6 to we've had certainly 14-year-olds that could not answer. They will nod, grunt, yeah. Right? And so what does that show you?
Those as adults in my office are the people who make agreements they have no intention of keeping, who are bitter and angry and resentful. There's key phrases you learn. When someone comes in and sits down, I do a lot of couples work. The majority of my work is clinical. As a clinical clinician, it's couples work. Oh, no, I'm the peacemaker. I want everything to go along. And I'm going, then that means whatever ugly stuff is rolling downhill, you're eating.
Oof, yeah.
Which means they're saying yes, but they're making promises they have no intention of keeping to placate. They're spending the majority of their time handling or managing the other partner's upsets, anxieties, frustrations, worries, criticisms, whatever.
Right.
And it's not always accurately true. I'm being pretty general, but the peacemakers are typically the ones who don't say no when they should. Mm-hmm. So they're spending a tremendous amount of time being who the other partner wants them to be instead of just being themselves. But they know for sure the moment they have an independent thought or a difference of opinion or that they don't agree, it's World War III. So they've learned to, look to the spouse before they answer.
So that's the kid that you're raising.
Absolutely. But the spouse has no respect for this person.
Right.
Has nothing but contempt.
So right behind that, there's the same. We've had multiple families. That's the function, but we have the mom of one of the, and they didn't land with us yet. Says, well, he's just awful. He can't be trusted. Kid's sitting there. He can't be trusted. Just sitting there, not looking at the conversation. Karina's appalled. Like
that's disgusting.
But
that's disgusting.
He can't be trusted. And if he has extra time here, and he's going to go walk to that restaurant across the street, he's going to walk by Dutch Brothers. And what if he buys Dutch Brothers? This kid's 12. This is how the mom's talking with him sitting there.
Yeah.
And now, here's the icing. She's a teacher. So she's in charge of a group of children every day, and this is her son. So then Karina just is like pausing, like trying to get through this interview, and she says, well, you could just not give him money, I guess. And just her heart's just breaking for this young boy, And Karina and I are really clear, like we can't filter them out because that's the young boy that this might be the place. In my mind, God's bringing him to try become himself. And that was the same one she has to draw the answer out of and get a full sentence from. And then we have friends that we see with young kids where it's the same thing. The kid's 5, 6, 7, 8. They still can't order their own meal. They can't walk somewhere without the parent. Some of them still can't tie their shoes. Just keep buying Velcro shoes or slip-ins. I coached Makoa's soccer. I think it was probably 50% of the kids could not tie their own shoes yet. And it boggled my mind. And again, maybe this is just, who knows what influence, but at an early age, I was fascinated with my kids to see what they were capable of. Because they wanted, if you don't stand in their way, they want to do everything, right? They're ready to drive too soon. They're ready to do all this stuff too soon. Big deal. Let's just see how far they can get. And I would do it with safety in mind and reason in mind. But then at 12 years old, my daughter's backing up my 3/4 ton pickup, hooking up the horse trailer, pulling it forward, loading the horse and everything else. And these parents are watching, and these are good parents, and they're going, how old is she? What the hell? And I'm like, yes, her brain is functioning. She is totally capable of this act. Yeah. How do you I just didn't stop her. I haven't stopped her yet. If she wants to do that, sure. Let's show you how to do it. My son, the same thing. Dad, I want to break these rocks with the sledgehammer. Well, just don't ding up my asphalt.
Yeah.
Like he's 10. He wants to break and smash stuff, test stuff. But it's been fun to be on the other side of it, to just go, okay, well, how much can you do? And full transparency, it's very similar at the Learning Center. Well, how fast can you get your work done? Your parents think they assigned you 1 hour of math. How fast can you get it done? And I'm looking at them just like that. And they're kind of like, because they're working it. How much math do they really want to do? They didn't want to do max efficiency for an hour? No. They're going to engineer the whole situation to get assigned what they're comfortable with for that hour. So it's fun to start pushing that. And then the parents will be like, oh, I can't believe how much they're getting done. Or on the other hand, they're getting some freedom and they can't focus at all. And then it's like just trying to, because the work is the important piece. And you can see that dynamic reflective, and they won't even sit and do what they're supposed to do because they get to talk to friends. They get to interact. They get to go move and sit over here. They're just not.
Yeah, I think the frustrating piece is you look at, whether it's in the education world, whether it's in the gym world, physical fitness, health, nutrition, mental health, parenting. We know what we know, and we, functionally, a lot of it works. But you really got to understand, is why the statement I made about how much anxiety controls a lot of what we do, which is fear-based.
Fear.
you have to be really clear. Your brain is really super comfortable operating at a certain level, and that should terrify you. Your brain works best when it is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.